these fraudulent voting apparatuses, I would like to say shame on the people that have conveyed this against the will of the people of our country. We need to shine the light on them. And we outnumber them. The good people outnumber the bad people. So I want the general public to know that up front. The citizens of our communities who love our families, who love our neighbors, who support our local businesses, they're the ones that are going to win here. We are the winners because we outnumber them. Keep truth and moral value always on the forefront when you deal with these shameful people that steal the will of the people. And the will of the people should be satisfied, and that is fair into our communities. When we look at the logistical support and material readiness of setting up a poll and setting up the position to come in and vote, we need to move that position into a very neutral state. And using the military is a very fair concept. However, there are mechanics that have to be put in place because we don't know exactly who's voting, right? So how is it that a 21-year-old can go into a liquor store and gets carded? And they're part of a community, so we at least can identify who they are. The same thing needs to hold true as we look at voting in our polls and voting in our communities. They need to be a part of the community. That's what makes us great, is the sovereignty of who we are as a people and the capacity to be part of something greater than us, right? To build our communities, to have baseball games with our loved ones, with our kids, and to support our local apparatus. These are the things when these people shamefully disrupt the quality and the conditions of our election functions. This is what I've looked at in my quantum grammar system, is how to make a level playing field where the people have that fairness. And, using the military would be a fine position, but there needs to be the mechanics put in place for the logistical support of the people so we at least know who's voting and that they're part of the community, because it's very unfair to bring an outside source in to vote in your community and they don't live there because they don't know the needs of the people there. It's always about the needs of the people. You go down to the local coffee shops, you go sit with the people at the baseball games or the basketball games, and you see what their concerns are, what they're struggling with. And then we try to identify that. And this is what I've set up in the quantum grammar system, where the people are more in charge of their lives, where the government is more of a backdrop. And we allow the will of the people to come forward. So I've taken a look at the Federal Elections Commission and their guidelines to elect presidents and senators, and found their sentence structure to be fraudulent because of the fraudulent grammar that they were using these negative words, because words have meanings. And so I identified that in 2012 at the Federal Elections Commission in Washington, D.C., and then in 2016 as well. They're very cognizant of my position in the quantum construct to give people a position of fairness. So hopefully that helps your audience comprehend, as I'm watching the logistics of what you guys are saying, know that there is a solution on the table. It is in place for the citizens, but it's up for good people to step up and make that choice if they so choose to use the logistics to make a fair and neutral. And the polls should be a position of neutrality, where we're not directing people how to vote, but giving them people free choice of who they feel is the best candidate for their needs in their venues. And venues are set up by flags. Flags have values, and those values change the condition of terms when you enter into poll locations. Those are some of the mechanics that I've set up with the Federal Elections Commission in Washington, D.C. and quantum grammar to give a position where you have a ball on the flag standard, right? Because what are you doing there? You're creating contract, right? You're directing the draft of what you choose as the will of the people, what direction you want to go. The first thing you would want to do to set up a poll correct is you'd want to put a ball on the flag standard, both outside the foreign vessel and dry dock, otherwise known as the poll building, and as the citizens come into the building, they have a ball on top of the flag standard. That way they know they're safe. They have a safe position to give closure on the will of who they want to draft or who they want to vote for. So the ball standard would go on top of the flag standard as you set the venue, because the venue must sit in neutrality for the people to make their choices. So these are some of the things that we've looked at in setting up the criteria to vote for leaders into position. And we want to make this as fair as we can for the people, and we want to give the people full closure so they know what they're walking into. Because the first rule of contract is closure. Once there's closure, then there's comprehension and knowledge to make a determination on what you choose to convey in your life and the sovereignty of your lives. So there's many aspects of sovereignty and many concepts of sovereignty. You can be sovereign in your heart, or you can be sovereign, as it comes onto paperwork. And so this is what I've looked at in the quantum grammar world, is how to step outside of the construct and paradigm of sovereignty to actually know what that means for oneself. shame on those people for doing this against all the people of our great country. Full closure, we call it closure, is knowing the terms of contract, right? Knowing what the words mean and the value of what words mean. And this is where the quantum grammar, where we use phrases to preset the facts, right? So we can now look at the facts for what they are. And as you know, James and Joss, facts don't have feelings, right? So now we don't have to have an emotional feeling about the facts, but now we can look at why the facts were performed. And now we have a comprehension and we have knowledge. And as we have knowledge, then we set up that knowledge platform and we lay it out in a venue that we can have what we call communion or joinder with the facts, right? I don't like to use the word usury because that's the old ideology of contract. I want to use more of a word that is contract communion, which means that we're communing with the concept because we concur with the terms of what's being articulated to convey a certain act or performance. And the voting is a prime place to start because you have to give the people that neutral position. And it's actually the military's job to set up a neutral position for the people, for a safe haven for us to be in, right? So different branches have different logistical functions, but they're all tied to the post office. What that means is before a soldier goes into the military, they have to go get their military registration ID number first. Once they get their military ID number, then they can go into their respective branch of where they test into or where they want to be in life. And so it's a postal construct. I was involved in the largest court-martialing in the history of planet Earth. And some of the things that I was privileged, because you got to comprehend, the Pentagon trained me. They trained me to be a leader and to know the mechanics of what it is to be an actual commander-in-chief. So some of the things that you'd want to put in place for the soldiers that would convey this act of neutrality for the people is you'd want to make sure that your commissions are run correct so that you maintain the rules of the continuance of evidence to safeguard the soldiers who are forming that position of neutrality for the people, because soldiers work for the people and the people must remember how to direct them. Benjamin Franklin was working for the British Crown and he was doing surveying for post roads to set up ports and venues for the British monarchy to come up through Canada, and they were in conflicts, of course. He was also working with France. He was a French barrister at the same time. And so he was changing hats in the middle of performing, setting up these commercial merchant venues to allow trade to happen. So the post office was gaining ground as it was used as a mark to identify commerce and goods moving from point A to point B. That would dealt with the postage stamps and setting up what they call postiliums. I was blessed enough to get into the private books of Benjamin Franklin at the Benjamin Franklin Post Office in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So I have a different perspective about 1775, 1776, based upon the money and the usury that people were engaged in. And unfortunately, a lot of the founding fathers were not given full closure on some of these nefarious games that were being played behind the scenes. They had good volition. You would call it intent, but I call it volition, condition of mind. They had a good condition of mind because they were wanting to set up a utopia for their families and for their loved ones. Heck, that's a wonderful idea. And at the same time, separate from the theology and some of the things that they were running from over in Europe. They had their own way of thinking, and that was on them, and they were sovereign. They were sovereign in their position to set that up. Unfortunately, they used those tools as commercial instruments, the banking systems have, and the postal systems, to do away with our rights and not tell us, and then create this dilemma that we have of where they're setting this global theater of martial law up against we the people and not giving us any solutions to a function to create settlements for we the people, because the people have been damaged here just by having to learn all this. You know, I've been damaged just by having to learn all this myself. I'm not complaining. Okay. But I'm setting up a scenario to where I can say, hey, look, here's a platform that because of the meritocracy of the shipping world that I didn't set up, but that they set up, I've set it up on a macro level, taking it all the way to the Universal Postal Union to break all the ties from the banking games that were being played against we the people. Because, look, I'm a free venture capitalist, right? I love free venture capitalism, right? I think that it's one of the best things on the planet. Unfortunately, the statutory laws and the rules and regulations for moving goods from point A to point B have overwhelmed the capacity of the normal citizen who is struggling just to start a business, right? It's very unfair what's happened from what I call a red tape position, from your LLCs to all the guidelines for setting up a business, All of that needs to be really taken back and really placed into the hands of the people, because it's our market trade port. It's our sovereignty. It is not the government's position to dictate the will of the people. And so how we take a look at that is, what I did is I took a look at the construct of setting up corporate structure to allow sovereignty of meritocracy to convey during this unfortunate global theater of this war zone that they were trying to set up. And so in doing so, setting up and looking at the material readiness and logistics of shipping and corporate structure, it took me into many theaters around the world. And those theaters weren't always the best of places, because I was normally surrounded by people that were against free sovereignty, free choice. And you always have to give the people that capacity of sovereignty to not make it an illusion of choice, but to actually pull off the parameters. And as you know, we're under constant bombardment of what we take in, the social engineering, let alone the geoengineering. If you watch some of the stuff in the geoengineering, it is very dangerous, and how they're trying to manipulate the mind. I've developed what's called a claim of the life system, which drops you out of that birth certificate system to allow one to claim their life, to claim their space. And I don't have to manage it, because for me, government isn't about management, it's about self-government from what comes in. The geoengineering that is happening against the citizens is so rampant with the 5G, chemtrails, all the things that we're seeing out here, the graphene oxide, how they're trying to tie into everything, the subliminal messaging, I mean, the harmonics of music, and all these things that they're using to contradict the moral value of who we are as people. It's up to us to find the God and the peace within our heart and to be one with that. A lot of people try to get me to trespass into theology. Everyone's on their own quest based upon their own knowledge. Different people have different experiences. So don't judge people from the outside, because we've never walked a day in one's shoes. And so I try not to be judgmental towards people. I try to just focus on my walk and my journey and stay self-centered within being grounded and trying to make the best sample to the world of, hey, there's a system in play. There's a lot of claimants out here now using the quantum grammar system, using it to set up their businesses, because we have to think outside the box here, because the box that they've created and the paradigm they've created creates a dilemma inside of me that I feel like I'm being damaged by just walking outside the door and looking up in the sky and seeing the chemtrails and seeing all the nonsense. Shame on those people for doing that. Who's allowing this to happen? Good people outnumber them. We can identify them, and then we just need to have the courage and the leadership to round them up. So hopefully the world can see what I've done in that scale to set a haven up, so that the bad guys or the thinking that causes damage to me, from what I'm witnessing from my position, that damages me, that it is stopped and it's turned off. All the things that they've given us, it's just nonsensical. The insurance companies, the pharmaceuticals, and everything that's stepped into play, the lobbyists, as you know, it's unfair, because all is engineered for a war against who we are as mankind. These games need to stop.